If I were to ask you, what are a couple of groups, position groups on this Oregon roster for 2025 that you think have question marks, maybe they're a little bit uncertain, and you're just not quite completely sure if they're going to be great or if they're going to be good or really good or just how good that they are going to be? What are some that you might choose? I think two that certainly stand out because of the amount of players, really good players, that they lost from last season: the offensive line and the secondary. Let me throw a stat at you. Okay? We know 5 players in the secondary in the Oregon defense. We know 5 players on the offensive line. Okay? That's 10 players combined. Now, those 10 spots, there are 3. Count them, 3 combined players on this 2025 roster that have started in 4 or more games wearing an Oregon Ducks uniform. 2 on the offensive line and 1 in the secondary. On the offensive line, Iapane Lalaolu, of course, at center. He's been a stalwart the last couple of years. Dave Iuli, I put the number at 4 because he started 4 games in relief of Marcus Harper last season. And then you got to go back to 2023 with Jaleel Florence. Of course, he was banged up last season, but Jaleel Florence started, I believe it was 9 games for Oregon during the 2023 season. And that is it, ladies and gentlemen. That's it. Now, let's go on to the next point here within this segment. Pro Football Focus. Now, their player rankings and ratings are a little bit odd, I will say, sometimes. So I think, take it a little bit with a grain of salt. But I think when they're kind of going through some of their position group rankings, I think you can certainly, I think this is certainly a valid ranking and something that we can certainly take very, very seriously. And we are going to take very, very seriously here on this show. Pro Football Focus ranks Oregon's offensive line coming into the 2025 season number 5 in the country. The secondary, you ask? Also in the top 10, ranked number 6 in the country, according to Pro Football Focus. Where does this kind of lead me to? It leads me to reload culture is alive and well in Eugene, Oregon, in the Pacific Northwest, man. Okay, whether it's pre-NIL and portal, and now it's more difficult to really reload as consistently in the post-NIL and portal era. If you're like, you look at the Alabamas of the world, you look at the Ohio States of the world, you look at the Georgias of the world, whatever team in whatever era that has had 5 years, 10 years, 15 years of consistent success where they are at the top of college football, what's a phrase that follows them? They don't rebuild, they reload. Oh, this team or that team, they lost all of this talent. They lost 12 guys to the NFL draft. They lost their entire offensive line. They lost their entire defensive line, whatever position group that we're talking about. When you've talked about that over the last 20 to 25 years with Ohio State, you said they're just going to go onto their bench. They're going to find the 4-star player. They're going to find the 5-star player that's waiting their turn to be able to come in, and they're going to be able to play. And Ohio State's going to be Ohio State. Under Nick Saban, you had the same thing with Alabama. I've heard some folks say, they're building a program and not necessarily teams. Look at the 2 teams that were in the 2023 National Championship game, or from the 2023 season. Michigan and Washington, and look what they dropped down to. Like, when you're building a program instead of a team, you're building 10, 11, 12, that type of yearly production like we saw under Nick Saban at Alabama, like we've seen at Ohio State since I can remember. I do not remember. I know Ohio State had that year where Luke Fickell was the interim coach where they went 6-7. Other than that, it's just been constant contending at the top of the Big Ten Conference. That's what this tells me, where Oregon is sitting after these 2 position groups were kind of decimated a little bit with the amount of really good all Big Ten type of talent and draft picks and all of that stuff, and that these 2 groups were really left behind with, and now how they're reloading. And one might say, yes, it is sometimes more difficult to retain some of this elite talent. So therefore, maybe it's sometimes more difficult to reload. But Oregon has also used the transfer portal to their advantage. I believe Oregon uses the portal, and I talked about this earlier in the show, but I think Oregon uses the transfer portal maybe better than anybody in college football. Like, you look at Emmanuel Pranon coming in on this offensive line. Like, he was going to be a mid-round draft pick. He moves up to Oregon to get an opportunity with an offensive line that has been back-to-back Joe Moore Award finalists. You look at Harkey moving up a level. You look at Isaiah World jumping up a level. And then you look at the secondary and some of the transfers that they bought in. Like, I think a big reason why these two position groups are as highly thought of as they are by Pro Football Focus is because of these transfers. I mentioned the guys in the O-line, and then you look at a guy like Dylan Thieneman coming in there at safety as well. So I guess it doesn't really matter how you do it. Great teams just do it. Great teams just reload. And Oregon is reloading on the offensive line. Oregon is like, usually reloading is like, hey, operating at the status that we were a year ago or whatever. Oregon is improving. They are climbing the ladder in the secondary with some of the additions and some of the recruits that they've developed and are expecting to step up, I think, into bigger roles, certainly on the back end of the defense. Now, let's talk about the offensive line and the secondary and really the rest of the team, because I want to talk about if these, I know we talked about what ifs kind of last week, but I want to talk about, man, if these two units are top five, this team could have real high expectations. But like offensively, I look at everything around them. Like, you look at the quarterback position, you're sitting really good there with either Austin Novosad or Dante Moore. You look to running back, I've said it many times, this is one of the deepest running backs that maybe the Ducks have seen in a very long time. Wide receiver, despite the loss of Evan Stewart, you feel really good there. Like how the offensive line gels together and how they mesh together is a big pivot point, exactly how successful this offense can be. If this is an offensive line that's operating at a top 10 level, that's operating at a top 5 level, the expectations are through the roof, honestly, offensively for this Oregon Ducks team. Like tight end, look what they got in Sadiq and Jamari Johnson, and even going down to Roger Salapaga, even going down to Vander Plug and some of the other names that are in this group. You look to the defensive side. If that secondary is playing like I've already raved on how much I love and how much I believe in this defensive line. Okay, and I said many times before how much of a complementary relationship the defensive line, specifically the pass rush, has on the secondary. I already believe, okay, there's people out there that believe that Oregon has the number one defensive line in the Big Ten Conference, and I think I'm in that boat as well. But man, if you have that secondary playing at that type of level and you have the defensive line, I know the linebacker, that's a great, I know Bryce Betcher was really good last year, but I think as a whole, you're looking for that group to really take more steps up, and then you form a complete defense. Okay, at the beginning, I said, hey, some people have differentiating opinions on Pro Football Focus. ESPN's Greg McElroy has Oregon as I believe the number 10 offensive line in his rankings, and I think the overall defense, he had them at number 9. So these are two groups, secondary, of course, a big part of the overall defense. These are two groups that I think a lot of people are expecting. We talked about that rebuild versus reload. I think now people nationally, they look around and they see it's like, yeah, okay, there might be a little bit of an uncertainty with Ife Obadegwu or Kingston Lopa or Dalen Austin or maybe Theron Johnson meshing into the other corner on the other side. At Oregon, I think people are maybe just saying, yeah, it's what they do. It works. That's just Oregon. That's just Dan Lanning. You look at the offensive side, and I think people are looking at these players that are experienced, the Harkeys of the worlds, maybe at the smaller levels. And I talked about Pranon and what he's trying to accomplish this season. I think then some of these national people are looking around and saying, yeah, these aren't brand new players. These are guys that have played football before. And Alik Terry is a good coach. These are offensive lines that have won back-to-back Joe Moore Awards. There's good coaching here. It's what they do. Like, is Oregon's offensive line now just getting to the category? Yeah, that's what they do. They're Joe Moore Award finalists. Maybe this year is going to be that confirmation that this is just what Oregon does, just like this is what Alabama did. It's what Ohio State does. It's what all of these elite level schools do. We'll see if Oregon can live up to those expectations where this offensive line and this secondary could be top 5. If they are, we are in that championship. We are in the national championship conversation. You are having that because I think there's some parts to this team that you're unsure of how they're going to come together. If this offensive line comes together and they are top 5, if this secondary comes together and they are top 5, combined with how good I feel about other position groups and the rest of the team, it's going to be really hard to beat this Oregon football team next season.